Welcome to Native Bidaské, Native News Online's weekly spotlight on the people making news and leading change in Indian country.
Welcome to another edition of Native Bidaské. I'm Levi Rickert, publisher and editor of Native News Online. This week we ran a story on Tuesday, a story of a lawsuit that was filed in the state of Oklahoma in a district court out there, relating to a young Native American woman named Lene Black, who last May had her eagle feather plume removed prior to commencement from the Broken Arrow High School. It's a affluent suburb of Tulsa, Oklahoma. This story has been really huge on Native News Online, so we wanted to talk about the case with this week's Native Bidaské guest. And we have two lawyers who crafted the lawsuit with us today for Native Bidaské guests, and they are Shoney Blake, who is Choctaw member from the Pipestem law firm based in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We have attorney Morgan Sanders, who works for the Native American Rights Fund, and she's based in Washington, D.C. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
And we have Jenna, who is our senior staff reporter at Native News Online. She's joining me today to ask questions. But I'm going to ask the first question. Could one or both of you tell us who is Lene Black, who she is, how she embraces her culture, and then we'll get into what happened. So who wants to start?
Yeah, so Lene is a member of the Oto-Missouri tribe of Oklahoma, and she comes from a traditional family, has been involved in her cultural practices since she was born practically. And this suit actually arises out of a feather, an eagle plume that she was given in ceremony when she was 3 years old as part of her cultural traditions. And that's the same eagle feather or eagle plume that she wore in her graduation ceremony that is the subject of this lawsuit. Lene is also a reigning tribal princess. She has been a dancer her whole life. She has danced with this very same eagle plume throughout her life. And she continues to be very involved in her community and in her tribal and cultural practices.
And she's currently a college student, correct?
She is. She's an undergraduate.
Okay, great. And hey, for those who may not know, especially non-natives watching this, what is an eagle plume?
An eagle plume is specifically is just one of the feathers comes from an eagle. And in the Oto-Missouri tribal traditions, the plume has a certain significance. So that's, you also see people sometimes use tail feathers or other parts of other different types of feathers from different birds. And this one specifically is an eagle plume.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that. I also appreciate, Shoney, how you described Lene, not just in terms of the lawsuit, but who she is outside of this traumatic incident. I really appreciate that background. Morgan, could you give our viewers an overview of the incident that happened last May at Lene's graduation ceremony?
Sure. So Lene arrived at the Broken Arrow Public School to participate in her graduation ceremony. She gathered with fellow students throughout that entire period of time. This plume was properly attached to her graduation cap, and a number of teachers, she spoke with them, nobody said anything about it. And there were various sort of checkpoints where students walked through and everyone made sure things were on straight, folks were in the dress code, and again, no one said anything to Lene. Right before she was ready to process out onto the football field where the graduation ceremony was going to take place, she ended up being sort of accosted by two school officials who physically put their hands on her and attempted to pull the eagle plume off of her cap while shouting at her and basically saying that she wasn't allowed to have this on her cap. They repeatedly referred to it as a decoration. And even as she tried to clarify that this is, a sacred item and that she was allowed to have it on her cap, they really ignored her and continued to try to pull it off. She ended up actually collapsing to the ground and trying to sort of defend herself and protect her plume, which is incredibly important to her. And throughout that incident, she really received no assistance, from anyone else at the school, other folks who were around witnessing this. And, it was later determined that the plume itself was actually damaged. It was physically damaged, and it also has been sort of ceremonially damaged.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty significant in that she was given it when she was 3 years old, and I'm assuming she may have been 18 at the time, so 15 years later this happened. Just the history of the fact she's worn it all these years is pretty significant. In terms of the lawsuit is real specific in terms of violation of freedom of speech, violation of some of her religious rights. Could you explain that, please, and how they were violated?
Sure. So, this case was brought in Oklahoma State Court, and the first claim is really under a state law that protects very explicitly your religious freedom right under the Oklahoma Constitution. The former Attorney General of Oklahoma issued an opinion letter that went out to school districts that said that law very clearly protects the wearing of eagle feathers and plumes at graduation. And so, by telling her she was not able to wear this, by forcing her to remove it, by damaging this plume, that is a direct violation of her rights of religious freedom under the Oklahoma Constitution. It's also a violation under the U.S. Constitution. The standard is very similar under both the state and federal constitution. You're not allowed to burden people's exercise of their religious rights, and that's exactly what was done here. And then for the freedom of speech piece, it's a little bit more nuanced, but basically schools are not allowed to discriminate between different types of speech, different types of expression, and other students at the graduation were wearing lots of different items. We have photos of people wearing large crosses, wearing a hijab, wearing a beaded medallion. And so for them to say that Lene couldn't wear this while other students were freely expressing themselves is a violation of her free speech right.
And Shoney, as Morgan was talking about the violation of some of the religious acts, in the sacred significance of this object of the eagle feather plume, strikes me it'd be really comparable to somebody walking up talking somebody's cross that they may have or a crucifix around their neck and trying to remove it. Would you agree that this is violation? I mean, so that non-natives understand this is pretty significant what happened. Can you respond?
Oh, certainly. So it most certainly is. I mean, just as you would use rosary beads or a crucifix to pray regularly, this plume for Lene and in her tribal traditions carries all the prayers of people of her community who have prayed for her throughout her entire life, including the prayers that were said at the ceremony when she received the plume. It also carries with it the significance and her prayers and feelings that she was expressing through the dances that she did as she was wearing it. So it's an object that carries a lot of significance, but also definitely a lot of prayer, and has really significant cultural meaning and religious meaning.
Mm-hmm. Jenna, back to you.
Yeah, so I wanted to say in response to Morgan, your overview of the situation and assertion, drawing the connection between constitutional rights, Oklahoma state constitutional rights, and the infringement upon both of those. I wanted to further break it down. So we know that Lene is not the only person that this has happened to. I reported 2 years ago something similar happened to an Alaska Native teenager who was graduating in West Anchorage High School. His sealskin cap was removed by an administrator in a very similar situation. And I'm sure it's not the two of them only, which is why state laws like the one that was ironically vetoed by Oklahoma's governor recently have been put forth. But could you further explain, Morgan, how, like you said, this is a right that's protected? My initial question was, isn't this a right that's protected by the U.S. Constitution? Why does there need to be more stringent or more explicit, rather, laws like the one that was put forth and, as you were saying, Shoney, largely supported in the legislature in Oklahoma? Is it because of instances like this, or why does there need to be something more than what we have in our U.S. Constitution?
Unfortunately, school districts, anything that isn't really explicit can be interpreted, by school districts to implement policies the way they want them to be implemented. And so sometimes we work with school districts and they don't understand at first, they're educated, and then they allow students to wear, their traditional regalia and eagle feathers. Other times the school districts are incredibly resistant, and it can take a lawsuit in order for them to understand what the law is. NARF brought a lawsuit in Arizona a couple of years ago, and the Ninth Circuit recently affirmed, that the student stated a claim for violation of her religious freedom and freedom of speech under the U.S. Constitution. But that took a couple of years, right, to work its way through the courts. And so when states have laws that in black and white for school administrators clearly states you must allow students to wear their tribal regalia at graduation, there's no room for discussion and there's no room for debate. And that is often what is necessary to get people to understand what should be done and must be done.
Yeah, and I really applaud the work of NARF and actually the Pipestem group too, law group. And I've always been a very big fan of NARF, so I want you to know that. You guys do tremendous work. As it relates to that, though, now the school system responded to an editor from Native News Online called this morning, and they basically said, look, we have this Native American coordinator, and I guess at the time our editor may not have read the lawsuit at that point, but I guess, let me understand this correctly. The Native American coordinator was on leave. Is that correct? So that could not even have happened? Or who wants to address that? You, Shoney?
That is correct. The Native American coordinator was on leave. And there was no interim person appointed at that time.
Yeah, and she was pretty clear that they had not officially received the lawsuit. So she really shouldn't have been talking about it when she's willing to talk a little bit about it. And this lady was not even, from my understanding, not even employed during the time of the incident. So, but she was speaking more and, how things could be, should be, but it obviously didn't happen correctly. So, great that you guys filed a lawsuit. I guess my question is, why is the lawsuit filed now? And I think almost by coincidence, it was filed 1 year to the date, if my memory serves it right, May 16th, to the incident happening. Well, is there any significance to that, or is it why is the lawsuit filed and why now?
So, unfortunately, lawsuits sometimes take a little bit of time. There is a requirement that when you sue either the state or an arm of the state, like a school, you have to provide significant amount of notice. So the school district was provided with notice that we intended to file this lawsuit in December, and then there's a number of months that have to elapse where they can sort of respond before the claim is considered what's called ripe or eligible to be filed. And so the lawsuit needs to be filed within a certain amount of time, but also there's a number of steps that have to occur before the lawsuit can be filed.
I wanted to ask about the irony. Like, it seems to me when I was reading this lawsuit, there's so many different angles of extreme irony. And I wonder if maybe you, Shoney, are willing to comment on those. One, the name of the school district, And also, like, can you talk a little bit about the significance of graduating from a Western education system and having something like this happen, like in the greater scheme of Indian boarding schools and this national reckoning that's afoot?
Sure. Well, so as far as the name goes, so the Broken Arrow Public Schools are on actually the Muskogee Creek Reservation. And so the name Broken Arrow, the township of Broken Arrow, was originally called that by the Muskogee Creek people who live there. That's where the name arises. I'll say, as far as the irony about the issues with boarding schools right now, I think it says something about just the general awareness of how Western institutions have gone about educating our Native youth, and how ironic it is that even within the Muskogee Creek Nation, our Native traditions can't be honored and aren't recognized in the way that they should be as equal to Western ideas of expression of religion, or not even Western necessarily, just religious expressions that aren't Indigenous. Because, as Morgan mentioned earlier, like the student wearing a hijab, the students wearing crosses, the very not as nearly as controversial, and clearly were able to walk across the stage wearing those expressions of their religion. But it is very ironic that within the Muskogee Creek Nation, a Native student's religious expression wasn't recognized as that.
Well, first of all, I have to say I appreciate, as publisher of Native News Online, that this lawsuit was filed. And so I fully respect the fact that now that the litigation is underway, any good lawyer would advise their clients not to talk to the media. Whereas we wish we could talk to Lene. We would love that, have the opportunity, or even a member of her family. We're happy that you two have agreed. But I guess just through talking to other reporters and people I know in Oklahoma, my understanding, this is a stellar family, and you said traditional, very well respected family, and that doesn't negate whether we're respected or not respected. This is a Native American that the rights were violated. I guess my question is, my understanding is she really suffered some trauma as a result of that. Can you kind of speak to that in terms of what Lene has gone through emotionally?
This deeply affected Lene, deeply affected her family. It was an incredibly traumatic event on the day of graduation. She almost walked out of graduation without even having received her diploma, because she didn't know that she was going to be able to continue to sit through the ceremony. And so, that has stayed with her. She still struggles to talk about this. And, we had to walk her through it a number of times in order to make sure we were accurately representing everything, in this lawsuit. And she gets emotional every time that she talks about it. And it is still something she is working through. And she remains concerned about how her college graduation will go, how people perceive her, how her teachers will perceive her. I think, though, she is deeply committed to this never happening to another student again, and this lawsuit was the best way she could think of to ensure that students in the future are protected in a way that she wasn't.
Yeah, and you Morgan, representing NARF, working for NARF, which actually has a broad implication throughout Indian country, nationwide. This has national implications, is that correct?
We get requests every year, like clockwork, around graduation season. I think I fielded 3 requests this week
Wow.
related to wearing of eagle feathers or other tribal regalia at graduations. And
Wow.
so it has really significant implications in Oklahoma, but also, around the country. And a number of states are considering legislation to protect the wearing of tribal regalia at school events. Right now, I can think of certainly North Carolina and Minnesota as two examples. And so, Lene is showing incredible courage and fortitude in doing this. And the goal is to make it better for other students.
To be clear, though, Morgan, would this lawsuit enshrine those rights, or it would rather set a legal precedent to protect other students?
Yeah, assuming we're successful,
Right.
and Pipestem Law and NARF both feel we have a very strong case here, it would set an important legal precedent in Oklahoma, and so that is something future students could point to. And I think the other hope is that, people who work in school districts are aware of this and maybe engage in better training, better policies, and also that people who are in positions of power to change this, people who work in public policy, consider this an important thing to work on.
Yeah, and Shoney, we know this lawsuit goes way, way beyond monetary value. The lawsuit is asking for at least $50,000 in damages. Do you think $50,000 is where it's a good start, or should damages be much more? Do you want to give an opinion on that?
I think it's a good start. I think that it is a shame that Lene is having to had to suffer through this event at all, given that it's already should be protected under the law. And I think that for her, this is about, even though the damages, are considerable and should be, I think for her, this is more about protecting future students from having to go through the same thing that she had to go through, having to suffer the same trauma and indignity that she had to go through at her graduation ceremony. Graduation should be a happy time for people. It should be a celebration. And that's not what Lene is left with after this. Not only does she have this really horrible experience in what should be a celebratory day, she also has an item of deeply religious significance that has been destroyed. And I don't think that there's any amount of damages, monetary damages, that can really atone for that. And so while, like I said, I think $50,000 is a good start, I think the best thing would be to protect other Native students from having to suffer these same things.
Yeah. And as I said, it goes way beyond money, and I fully appreciate that. Jenna, do you have any other questions?
I don't. I appreciate you both taking the time to explain this all and break it down. I think it's been very educational for both us and our viewers.
Yeah, I do have one last question that relates to Governor Stitt, and we know that last month he vetoed Senate Bill 429 out in Oklahoma. What's the tie-in with that? And as I recall, that legislation really didn't speak a whole lot about the religious aspect. Is that correct? And who wants to speak to that?
I can speak a little bit to that. I think that bill was getting at this notion that sometimes traditional ways are not recognized as religious in the same way that Western religious rites are.
Okay.
And so in order, to help kind of expand, I think, people's ideas of what is acceptable and what can be considered religious, because recognize that we're also working under a Western legal system, right? With Western Western ideas about what is religious, that it helps expand that and would provide more clarity to school districts and others about what is protected.
And we want to invite both of you ladies back, being the attorneys representing Lene Black, when this gets further down the road. Any idea Morgan, how long this could actually take in the court system out there?
We're not sure. The next initial step is that the school will have an opportunity to respond, and that will likely be, potentially in the next month or so, but it could be slower than that. And then there will be, sort of briefing where they get to make their sort of assertions, reject things that we've said, and we'll have the opportunity to respond. I think we're certainly open also to having discussions with the school district about how to address this amicably. I think Lene would be really interested in an apology and in talking about how to ensure this doesn't happen to other students in the future. And so we're open to having those discussions. But unfortunately, the wheels of justice turn slowly. And, the best thing for students is for these issues to be addressed, proactively, and to not have school districts engage in this type of conduct such that it then has to be addressed sort of after the fact and when it's too late to really have what should have happened, which is a positive celebration.
Yeah.
Morgan, one brief follow-up to that. Do you know if the two administrators that were named in the lawsuit, in addition to the school district, still work at the school?
As far as I know, they do, but that has not been confirmed by the school.
I was just curious.
Shoney, you have the last word on this. What do you want to leave for our viewers?
I just want people to know that this protection of this kind of speech is overwhelmingly supported by the Oklahoma legislature. And we shouldn't leave it up to independent or individual administrators at individual school districts. Because I also want to point out that other people saw Lene wearing this eagle plume and didn't have this same reaction. Other school teachers and people who were in charge of graduation did not have the same reaction. And so there needs to be a way to address it beforehand, and also a way to have some kind of uniform way of or uniform standard across the state, across the United States would be great too, of that this kind of religious speech is protected, and this is something that people are able to do in a way that they're able to express themselves at their graduations.
Yes, and to our viewers, we every single year Native News Online, and we've been in business for 12 years now. It seems like there's always an incident every single year, and this one actually happened last year, but the lawsuit was filed this week. It's something that Native Americans live with, and as Morgan said, she's already had 2 or 3 cases this week alone, and she's heard about this time of year. It happens. Graduation is a very significant thing for Native Americans. As I wrote in an editorial just recently, when my 3 children graduated from high school, I had tears in my eyes, because, and I said, why are you getting tears welling up in your eyes, Levi? I said it to myself, but I know the stats for Native Americans. We still fall really behind in all racial ethnic groups in the United States, 15 points behind Caucasians in terms of graduation rates from high school alone. And so the idea of graduation is wonderful. Tribes support them by giving eagle feathers and other sacred objects to our graduates, and we're very proud of our graduates. So any graduates out there, keep doing you're doing, and stay strong, and feel free to come forward as Lene Black has done. She's a very courageous young lady, and so much success to both of you as attorneys, and thank you for your fine work you're doing. And to our viewers, we will have another guest next week on Native Bidaské. Have a safe week, and celebrate graduations out there for Native American students.
If you appreciate what we do here at Native News Online, we invite you to donate to support our continued work covering Indian country. You can scan this code with your smartphone or go to the link located below this video to donate today. We greatly appreciate your support. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and be sure to scan this code or go to the link below to subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you for joining us today, and please be sure to join us again next week for another episode of Native Bidaské. Chimi Gwech.